think we've got a really exciting presentation tonight about something I've always had a ton of questions about, and that's what?
Christmas.
What's with the Christmas tree shopping? What happened to them? So we have Anthony Sammarco here with us tonight. He's a noted historian, believe it or not, started writing in 1995. Okay, and has written over 60 books about Boston and the surrounding communities. He's written about Howard Johnson's, which, by the way, was my first job. I was a fry cook and busboy at Howard Johnson's in Baldwin Park, California, where I grew up. And he's also written about the Baker Chocolate Company, two of the more notable books. He has taught at the Urban College of Boston. He was awarded Educator of the Year and is on their leadership council. And he's received numerous awards and recognitions for his work. And I think there's nothing more important, or there are a few things more important right now than treasuring and cherishing our history and what made us the people that we are. And so Christmas tree shops are part of the Cape, and I want to learn all I can about them. Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, so go ahead, Anthony.
Thank you very much. Well, I want to welcome you and thank you for coming this evening. Even though I did teach at the Urban College for 20 years and I taught at Boston University Metropolitan College for 12 years in the evening, I had a financial career. I was treasurer of a company that imported sea containers from Asia. So that was a 42-year career, and I enjoyed it because I could juxtapose my writing and history along with something that provided remuneration. But I think sometimes when we see this type of a glitch for anything to do with computers, I think back to two cousins. They were maiden ladies, and they lived at their summer house in Vermont. One was a retired Unitarian minister, the other was a retired landscape architect, and I used to love to visit them. We put a sheet up over the wall and I'd show slides. So in some ways, when I look at that type of a thing, it was a much easier setup than HDMI and computer. But we're here to hear about tonight the Christmas tree shop, and I bet everyone here at one time or another went to the shop. It was something that was not only an iconic chain store, but it started here on Cape Cod. Seen here on the cover of the book, it's actually the building that stood adjacent to the Sagamore Bridge. It's not only one of the more interesting stores, but it had a working windmill and the largest thatch roof in the world. Well, the whole thing was that the company itself had started much earlier than 1970, when the Billazekians, who actually bought it, continued to expand. The Christmas tree shop was started in 1946 by Charles and Alice Matthews, who moved from New York to Cape Cod and purchased a small store at the corner of Route 6A and Willow Street in Yarmouthport. And the property included two smaller shops, the Wayside shop run by Catherine Gorley and Lavinia's Window run by Gladys Beasley. And both shops were considered antique and curiosity shops. The Christmas tree shop offered Christmas-themed items. I'm just making sure. The Christmas tree shop offered Christmas-themed items such as decorations, ornaments, and small gifts. And the Matthews opened the shop on Memorial Day and would close after Labor Day. And as the Massachusetts Blue laws did not allow business on Sundays, it was a struggle. The business went bankrupt in 1961 and was bought at auction by Don Winner. Seen here was the entrance to the Christmas tree shop, and the Matthews didn't say welcome, they said Merry Christmas. Well, the whole aspect was that we began to realize that this was a place only open for a few months during the year on 6A, and it was located in the Dexter Payne General Store. This was built in 1856, and Payne lived above his grocery store. But seen here in a photographic postcard of 1955, it had an assemblage of things, including a Santa Claus in a sleigh with reindeer on the roof parapet. In that instance, we began to realize that by the early part of the 1960s and 1970s, this was something that was changing. Chuck and Doreen Billazekian had started a store in 1970 that would eventually expand to 23 stores throughout New England and New York by the era of 2003. The Christmas tree shops expanded in areas that not only had a large population, but where many people were already aware and shopped at them on Cape Cod. In 1970, the story of the Christmas tree shops began when they traveled for a July 4th vacation on Cape Cod. And while there, Chuck had planned to meet with Don Winner of Yarmouthport to try and sell some excess inventory from the Cambridge Coffee, Tea, and Spice House where he worked. Winter owned the Christmas tree shops, which he had bought in 1961 at auction after the Matthews declared bankruptcy. And the store was in the closeout business, buying overstocked items at a low cost and then selling them at bargains. After meeting with Chuck, Winter casually asked, "Do you want to buy a business?" Didn't that sound fortuitous? Well, Chuck and Doreen thought it over, and it seemed not only feasible but exciting, and it was something they could do together. In early September 1970, they made a $10,000 down payment that included money from credit cards, and they became the owners of the Christmas tree shop. In that instance, you began to realize they revitalized the place almost immediately. They too lived above the shop, but they created something that they called the Christmas tree shops, plural, because it had, as you see here, a front shop, a barn shop, and a back shop. These were buildings that dated to the latter part of the 19th century, and in some instances, they could stock them with things that they had actually procured locally or bought at auction in Boston. This is a trade card from the period of 1971. It said they offered Christmas cards and decorations, English bone china, silver, stainless steel, crystal, music boxes, stationery, jams and jellies, candles, soap, toys, furniture, and wall decor, all at half the usual price. Well, in that instance, a bargain was something that not only was to be procured, but it was something the Bill-Ezekians took great pride in. Seen here, Chuck Bill-Ezekian, sporting a pipe with his dog Pooch, is seen in the Christmas tree shop in Yarmouthport in the early 1970s. The Christmas tree shops would begin by offering bargain household items, by buying up overstock and discontinued items from manufacturers and other discounted products that would in turn be sold at the store at a bargain. Well, the interior of the shop was something that was really quite unique. Wide oak, pine, paneled walls, horrendous fluorescent lighting, shelves everywhere, and a dozen of this and 2 dozen of that, or maybe even one of another. This is a photograph from 1971, and though they tried to get away from the concept that the only thing they offered were Christmas decorations, they always had Christmas trees filled to the brim with ornaments that you could purchase at a very low cost. Well, in this instance, you began to see that when they purchased things, they might purchase in bulk, or they might buy a set number. This is a display that offered Lillis Solifer, which were 8-inch high vases, which were 24% lead crystal, and sold at the bargain price of $3.99 versus $5.99 at a gift shop. Lillis is French for lilac, and Solifer is French for a vase designed to hold a single flower. Well, as you can see, they probably have 36 of these vases. But if it didn't interest you, maybe up above you wanted a 4-inch salad bowl of 39 cents or 3 for $1. You could never go wrong. But the concept was you never knew what you would find. And the Bill-Ezekians in that instance, even though they tried to dispel the idea of just Christmas themes, would make a killing during the holiday season. Here we have a tree not only decorated with wonderful ornaments, but candy canes. And these were North Pole's finest candy canes, sweet tasting treats, handmade here on Cape Cod, 50 cents a piece or 3 for $1. Now during the period, of course, any business would want to do advertising. Holiday season is usually when a business makes 35% of their average annual sales. So on the right-hand side, and this is at the Yarmouth store, they would have Mrs. Santa Claus come to visit. She'd come on a Saturday with one of her elves. Obviously, Santa was too busy at the North Pole making toys to be delivered at Christmas. She would sit on a throne on a slight dais and, of course, greet the children. I don't know if they were disappointed it was Mrs. Claus, but she was dressed in a red velvet robe with white rabbit fur, and she would greet upwards of 1,000 children. Any child with parents within driving distance would come because she'd be there every Saturday during the Advent season. This was important. Children would tell her what they wanted, and she said, "I'll tell Santa Claus when I get back to the North Pole this evening." You can only imagine the joy that the children had. And in that way, we began to realize, by the period of 1975, this was a company that had started in one building on one floor but by 1975 had 8 locations, both on Cape Cod and off. This is a trade card that said a bargain for all seasons, which was the logo motto at that time. And the Christmas tree shop advertised that shopping at the stores was literally a bargain for all seasons, not just Christmas. The stores were to become open year-round in the early 1970s, which made a huge impact on sales. But this store chain began, as we see here, to have 8 stores: Hyannis, West Yarmouth, Yarmouthport, Sagamore, West Dennis, Orleans, Falmouth, and the first one off Cape in Pembroke. This was incredible in just 5 years. Chuck Bill Ezekiam seemed to be a master of marketing, and his wife would actually run the business during the day. The two of them worked as a unit, and what they did was to create something that people, not just on Cape Cod, but throughout Massachusetts knew about. This is a newspaper advertisement, and it was a supplement to the Patriot Ledger, the Cape Cod Sunday Times, and the Enterprise, and would feasibly reach over 250,000 readers. The Christmas tree shop said, "Let's celebrate value. First quality merchandise at savings of up to 50% or more." Well, on the left-hand side is that supplement. This was 8.5 by 11 inches, and it was 40 pages long. It was also in color. And it was something that showed the things that you could just simply not live without. They had a caned rocking chair, a table with a lamp, a tea service, a wooden train, duck decoys, and even an Oriental-themed umbrella stand. People just couldn't believe it. A wide variety and at great prices. On the right-hand side is an insert. It's a detail of what would have been seen in the interior. And this was French crystal. It was engraved with a clipper ship, which was perfect if you had a house on Cape Cod. You could entertain family and friends with a nautical-themed evening and be proud of your dining table. Well, in this instance, by 1976, they realized in some instances people, including themselves, would actually not have a cookie-cutter job. Many of us were in a career that we worked from 9 to 5. I didn't. But the concept here was that many of their employees didn't either. They did what was necessary, but they decided to begin in some ways to create a mission statement. And they said that the Christmas tree shop strives to be the premier value retailer by offering a unique and exciting shopping experience. They said, "We're committed to exceeding our customers' expectations in service, value, and selection. We foster a culture that sponsors growth and career opportunities for our employees in an atmosphere of respect and courtesy. And the Christmas tree shop's foundation for success is based on retailing excellence and sound fiscal policy." So this applied not just to the Bill Ezekiams, but to every person who was a buyer, a store manager, a person who stocked the shelves, or even swept the floors. But we realized in some ways this was a major feature to realize because there were employees of all descriptions. Because my company was a trucking company that brought in sea containers, I thought I would actually hoist and honor the truck drivers. Seen here is the Christmas tree shop van, painted red with the sign of the Christmas tree shop. It was bought from William Filene's and Sons in Boston for $800. At that point, it had over 100,000 miles, and they used it for an additional 8 years. These men would not only load the merchandise from the dock onto the truck and then deliver it to the various stores throughout the area, but they also realized in that instance that within a few years, the company had grown to such an extent that now they were importing sea containers from Europe and Asia. These men now actually brought cabs to Conley Terminal in South Boston, and there 40-foot and even 60-foot containers filling everything from Portuguese tile, Italian majolica, baskets that look like Nantucket baskets from Poland, as well as all sorts of tchotchkes from China, would then be brought to Cape Cod. The whole concept was, as they continued to bring in new and more exciting things, they increased their customer base. And it was an important realization that their customer base was as broad-based as their employees. Now, most employees did initially come from the Cape, but as they expanded, they were throughout New England. But one group of people that were instrumental in Christmas Tree Shop's growth was the Flying Squad. And we can see here they're getting their wings, which you can see are literally angels' wings. But the Flying Squad would travel to help with stocking a new store that was to open. They would also help any store that had an approaching ad shoot, or if a store was planning a large floor plan change, they could ask if the Flying Squad could come and help. Joyce Adams, seen on the first row on the left, said that the squad offered a chance of moving up with the company, traveling to different stores, meeting new people, learning new skills, being involved from the beginning on a new venture for the Christmas Tree Shops. I called it the Christmas Tree Shop MBA, because these people would be trained not only to be store managers, or maybe management within the office, but even buyers who went throughout the world. The funny thing was, this might have been a Cape Cod store that actually grew from a one-story building, but it was something in that instance that provided things that people could not live without. In this way, we realized some of the things they offered were really quite unique. And this is Cape Cod Air, and it was sold by the Christmas Tree Shops as a whimsical souvenir for tourists visiting Cape Cod. They were bottles containing genuine Cape Cod Air that were made by the Christmas Tree Shops. There was also a proviso, as customers were cautioned, to avoid contamination by ordinary air, do not remove the cork after crossing the Cape Cod Canal. These bottles of air sold by the boxful. The labels were affixed to the bottles by Gregory and Jeffrey Bilazikian, the sons of the owners, often joined by their friends Nan, Beth, Susie, and Jane Johnson, who helped. They were probably lured into doing this for pizza for dinner. But it was something that sold. They also had the legend of the pickle. Now this was something that was a green 4-inch glass pickle. And it said, to start a tradition that will surely last, here's a short story about a pickle of glass. The night before Christmas, it's hung on the tree. While everyone's sleeping, it's done secretly. And on Christmas morning, when you arise, the first one who finds it will get a surprise. A family tradition for all to share. You look for the pickle year after year. Did anyone's family do this tradition? 2 people, wow. That's more than I've ever seen anywhere else.
I have one.
Do you really? Well, at $1.99, how could you not have a family tradition? And of course, there was Santa's magic Christmas dust. These were little bags of gingham run up on the sewing machine with a red ribbon. And they were filled with 2 scoops of glitter and 2 scoops of oats. And the tag attached to it said, to all good girls and boys, on Christmas Eve, take this bag and sprinkle the contents on the lawn of snow. The glitter will shine in the moonlight and help me find your house. My reindeer love the smell of oats, and if they're hungry, they can have a quick snack. Ho, 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 Merry Christmas. What child would leave the Christmas Tree Shop without a bag at $3.99? And it didn't matter if there were 5 children in the family. They sold by the dozens. And these were things in some ways that began to create wonderful family memories. Christmas Tree, in a way, was a great marketeer. They made a company in some ways that provided bargain items. But those bargain items sometimes were not only useful, but they were also something that created comment. Well, for the knitters on Cape Cod, these wire display bins had Lion Brand yarn pressed at $1.99 per skein. Lion Brand yarn has been on the market since 1878, and the company is today a 5th-generation family-owned business that has a long offered different types of yarn. Some of their most popular yarns are homespun, thick and quick, fun fur, wool ease, and Vanna's Choice, named for Vanna White. At $1.99, with a variety of colors and a variety of different types of yarn, this was something that was a great bargain, especially during those long winter days on Cape Cod. They also had set up seasonal displays, and this, of course, is a summer display. They had, of course, a pine picnic table, and on it, galvanized buckets. These were things that had a heart, Cape Cod, and the arm of Cape Cod on it, and you could fill it with ice to cool whatever your beverage of choice was. But it also offered all sorts of stuffed animals, from red lobsters, whales, and even teddy bears. But the concept was they also offered Cape Cod taffy. Now, taffy is something anyone over the age of 50 knows you do not eat. It actually removes fillings as well as teeth. But at $1.99 a pound with 21 different flavors, it was the perfect gift to bring your mother-in-law. They also did things that had nautical themes, such as these 3-foot-tall illuminated lighthouses. They were solar powered, and at $19.99 you could actually place them either at the end of your driveway or on the walkway, so that of course your house was illuminated during the evening. Seen here, not only were they a bargain, but this display had everything from fish that you could hang on the wall as decoration, as well as whale tails as salt and pepper shakers, and of course tins that had an anchor. Each of these displays were done by the employees. Now, these employees were really quite crafty. They could make these displays not only interesting, but people began to realize the things that you could do with them. The average ratio of years for employees was 15 years.
Wow.
So you began to see not only did they enjoy their job, and yes, they were remunerated, and I'll mention that later, but they also had an artistic flair. And this was something that also in some ways included children. Well, many tourists, as well as Cape Cod residents, stopped at the Christmas tree shops to pick up essentials for their vacation on Cape Cod. In addition to snacks, candy, paper plates, and napkins, a beach chair was a necessity to relax on the beach and get some sun as one stared at the ocean and the far-off horizon. But here, children could choose a variety of things. The little boy is choosing a color-coordinated sand pail and shovel that will allow him to make sand castles at Ropes Beach here in Cotuit. Or on the right-hand side, as I was corrected, these are boogie boards. And the children could actually purchase a variety of colors and designs. Inexpensive, even if they were lost during the vacation, they were something that could be enjoyed, but simply discarded. But during the holiday seasons, especially in the fall, Christmas tree shop came into its own. Do you remember the aroma of cinnamon as you walk through the door? Of course, it's a sensory type of a thing, and of course we smell aromas of cinnamon. We think, oh, what a wonderful smell. Here, they actually created a display with 4-foot-tall scarecrows, complete with flower-bedecked caps. 3-foot-tall tin pumpkins, some decorated, some plain. And wooden boxes filled with not only gremlins and all sorts of silk and plastic flowers that you could create a display, whether it was a wreath for your front door or a display for the wall. Christmas Tree Shop provided a variety of things, and in many instances, people took advantage of it. Holidays were an important feature, but so too wasn't Christmas. They still played on that theme, though they wished to dispel it. And according to German folklore, nutcrackers bring good luck to the family and protect the home. It is said that they represent strength and power and watches over the family, keeping evil spirits and dangers away. Little did I know when I bought my nutcracker some 40 years ago that it wasn't really a nutcracker and that I broke the poor nutcracker's tongue trying to crack a walnut. He did stand on the mantelpiece for a couple of years. But look on the left-hand side, variety of sizes, heights, and of course uniforms. The nutcracker was synonymous, not only with the nutcracker presentation, but the whole concept in some ways of an inexpensive but highly wonderful Christmas ornament. Well, this button was distributed to customers by the Christmas tree shops and boldly proclaims the slogan, "Don't you just love a bargain?" This is by 1980. This catchy slogan was used in newspaper flyers as well as a jingle on radio and television commercials. Customer Estelle Zimmerman remembers that when she first saw these television commercials, she said, "I was way too many things that I wanted. I want definitely come out of the store broke," unquote. And in the mid-1990s, Christmas tree shops introduced a series of commercials in which the chain's customers were recorded showcasing items they had purchased, paired with the soon-to-be famous jingle, "Don't You Just Love a Bargain?" And I'm sure it resonates in our heads. We heard it on the radio, on television, and it was also in print in the newspaper. In that instance, Chuck and Doreen started the Christmas tree shops, yes, in 1970, but they could never have imagined that the company would grow to 23 stores by 2003. Their hard work, strong drive, mutual support, and business acumen were vital in the company's success. But they also realized that their employees were an important part of the continued growth of the company. One shopper confessed, quote, "I'm particularly intrigued by the fact that I can find all kinds of doodads I never knew I needed until I started poking through the merchandise. How do they know I needed a teapot shaped like a banana?" Unquote. And in that way, you never knew. And of course, as they grew, most stores had a wider selection, but of course it didn't change as much as it had in previous years. By the late 1970s, they began to design stores with an architect that usually took a little bit of a flavor, architecturally, of the neighborhood in which it was to be built. This is the Hyannis store at the corner of Route 28 and Camp Street. It's adjacent to the railroad yards that connect Hyannis and Boston. So when they built their new store, they decided it would look like a railroad depot of the early 20th century. A wraparound piazza, a waiting room, and a projecting tower. Something that was not only unique, but a little indicative of the neighborhood in which it was built. But they took it one step further. And Jeffrey and Gregory Bilazikin, sons of the owners, posed on car 2639 wearing their railroad conductor caps. In November of 1975, Chuck bought 4 railroad cars formerly owned by the New Haven line, which had declared bankruptcy. And during the sale, Chuck insisted that he and his son should be allowed to ride the train from Middleborough to Hyannis, where he placed them on his property. And thus, Christmas Crossings opened in 1977. So not only did you have a store designed to look like a railroad waiting station, but now you had trains directly behind it. It created a cachet that one store after the other began to actually have something. The Falmouth Christmas tree shop was opened in the summer of 1980, and Falmouth had become a tourist area and summer resort in the mid-20th century. Customer Dan Roach said, quote, "The Christmas tree shop in Falmouth is one of our traditional shops when we visit the area. We love the amount of home decor, seasonal goods, teas, snacks, and beauty products that we can buy at this store. We also appreciate the fact that the prices are reasonable," unquote. In that instance, the building with its very attractive French-inspired bronze awnings and the widest cornice I've ever seen would have the ribbon cutting on the lower right-hand side. These stores were all unique, but the name, the Christmas Tree Shop, in its font remained the same. Here, the Cape Cod Times reported that the Orleans store opened its door the weekend of Mother's Day without so much as one advertisement announcing the fact. The parking lot was jammed on opening day. You might remember this building. It was at the junction of Route 6A and 28. It was actually the junction as you came in from Eastham. Originally, it was the location of a Howard Johnson's, the first restaurant franchise in the United States, opened in 1935. And the building directly behind it was the Sprague Mansion, and Reginald Heber Sprague ran that Howard Johnson franchise. They demolished his house and built a sea captain's house on its site, along with an addition to the barn, which was all display space. They also had this at the Holyoke Mall in Holyoke, Massachusetts. As they continued to move further and further west, some of them were located in shopping malls. Well, the Holyoke area, of course, is rich, many different colleges. And we realized on the wall, they decided to have a mural painted of Holyoke's history. But on the far right-hand side, they decided to have an ascending balloon. Now this was a balloon, a hot air balloon, that actually had a man standing in a wicker basket. and he had a flag in his hand. It did nothing, but it ascended to the ceiling every 15 minutes and came back down. And people would just stand there watching this little man with his flag going up to the ceiling. It was a cachet, but it was something that people never forgot. And children would watch this, and of course as they grew older and older, maybe their children would actually see this. Everything seemed to be unique, and in this way, the Boston Herald commented on the new store in Linfield with its red and white striped lighthouse that it was a local version of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Well, we all know from our Italian trips that this is not the Leaning Tower of Pisa, but it was adjacent to the old Ship Restaurant. Do you remember the Ship Restaurant on Route 1? Great place. I went to 2 family weddings there, both ended in divorce, but they have the best meals and a very good libation. But the Bill-Ezekians built this as a nautical theme. You can see on the right-hand side there were actual boats on davits that were unusable, but they were great decoration. The tower was something that actually had a working light. It was a lighthouse, and it worked every evening, and it blinked out every 1 minute, I love you. And it was something that people on Route 1 would swerve to see as they're going down a 3-lane highway. And of course the Salem Eagle Tribune reported, as with each Christmas tree shop, the Salem store will possess its own motif, a racehorse track look. The storefront will have elongated spires and towers similar to those found at nearby Rockingham Park Racecourse. You can see this in some ways, a huge Christmas tree sign in the center between the 2 twin towers. It was something that was unique and special. But in that way, the one that I think is the most iconic of all of the stores was that was built at Sagamore. Now, the Sagamore Bridge is usually something we all dread going across. If you're in the left-hand lane, you have a better chance of getting across it quickly. On the right-hand lane, there are 2 lanes going into one. But the Sagamore store must have cost a lot of accidents and a lot of money for people watching this being built. The land was bought from the Howard Johnson Corporation. He had never built a restaurant here, but he owned the land. He did build one at the Bourne Bridge. But the land was used in such a way as to create the largest oversized Irish cottage in the world. Not only was it built of stone and mud, but you also saw the largest thatched roof in the world, and a working windmill, something that was not only unique and not really practical, but created a cachet. Well, during that period, the Christmas tree shop, according to the Cape Cod Times, had the largest thatched roof in the world, and thatching is the craft of weaving a roof with such things as straw, water reed, rushes, or heather, and then layering it to shed water away from the inner roof. Known as the world's first traveling thatchers, Michael, William, and A.J. Cahill were from the village of Claregalway, Ireland. They thatched the 24,000 square foot roof that is listed in the Guinness Book of World Records. But it was not just local attention that this new store was getting, as the Washington Post published a commentary that said, "This unique retail establishment boasts Disney-esque architecture of a humongous artificial thatched roof and windmill." Well, it may have been Disney-esque, but it certainly was not artificial thatch. When this was completed, the Sagamore store won a Bill, Massachusetts Architecture Award. So it wasn't just a place to open to provide all sorts of bargains. It was now a destination and an architecturally impressive building. In that instance, the building at Hyannis at the Rotary was something that really took the cake. Ed Mullen, who was the right-hand man to the Bill-Ezekian, said, "To design the new Hyannis store, Chuck, Doreen, and I went to Disney World. We sat on Main Street for days like little kids, studying the buildings and working up a Victorian look for Hyannis." When the store was done, we returned to Orlando to receive a national award for the best exterior store design of 1999. Imagine, from the entire country. So this was something, as you approached it, maybe at dusk, not only was it a little bit dark, but all of the lights were on, not only from the shop itself, but also directly above. and you began to realize it was something that was unique. But they embellished it even further. The Hyannis store had a four-sided clock that was manufactured by the E. Howard Clock Company in Boston. This was something that was not only a leading clock manufacturer, they made luxury watches, but the four-sided clock was made between 1910 and 1920 for a now demolished meeting house. A Verdun Company glockenspiel was installed below the clock and was a unique attraction that delighted people. See it on the lower right. It sported moving figures at different times of the day, and the glockenspiel played Three Cheers for the Red, White, and Blue, Old Man River, and Morning is Broken, among other songs. This was something that was unique. I always think it was probably something similar to the Prague tower that actually had saints parading, but in this instance it was all sorts of nursery rhyme characters. But in addition to a clock and a glockenspiel, there was a carillon. And the carillon created music that greeted arriving shoppers as well as bidding farewell to shoppers bringing their bargains to their cars. The carillon was composed of a large bell and 24 smaller bells ranging in 2 octaves. The large bell rings every hour on the hour and was cast in 1942, and the 24 smaller bells were cast in Holland in 1989. Was it necessary? No, but I bet you remember listening to the wonderful music, the clock striking, and maybe even the glockenspiel dancing between the 4 corners of that tower. Recently, when I had gone to Joanne Fabric, which was there, and the clock actually struck, and I heard the music, I said, oh my God, it's greeting me. I know I finished the book. I was happy, but it was also the fact in some ways it was poignant because the clock tower was being removed. This is the South Portland main store on opening morning. Much like the Orleans store, Christmas Tree Shop didn't do any publicity. The publicity was just simply building the store as people passed by in automobiles and buses. The South Portland store was an important opening. Do you remember ever going to the Christmas Tree Shop and giving your zip code? Well, that zip code was used to actually find out where people were coming from. And the preponderance was, the larger the population that actually showed that zip code, they'd open a store. Well, this store was to be opened at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning in August. This is a photograph from the front doors at 6 a.m. Not only did they know it was coming, but they even have their carriages at the ready. People shop there sometimes daily, if not once a week. They came with their parents, their aunts, their friends, and children. The Christmas tree shops would create a logo of a red sleigh with an evergreen tree cut and located in the sleigh, and a little ornament directly above the eye of Christmas. This logo was readily identifiable and would eventually be on 23 different stores. But during the 30th anniversary of this company, which was incredible, not only the employees, but the Bill Ezekiel's family decided to have a celebration. They had a warehouse in Hyannis, and of course they decided to have a huge party under a tent. They hired a man who actually had a red sleigh and of course 2 Percheron horses that would pull the Bill Ezekiels and Ed Mullen on the far left-hand side to the center of the celebration. Because it was in August, thankfully the sleigh had wheels. There was no snow or sleet to actually pull it. But when they arrived, they actually saw a 3-story cake. One can only imagine the sense of pride the Bill Ezekiels had after 3 decades of nurturing and growing a small business into a multi-million-dollar company with thousands of employees. The Christmas tree shops were one of the largest employers on Cape Cod in the 1990s. Now the whole concept here was, when you look at this, you begin to see in some ways, not only was it a celebration, but these people had given everything they had in 1970. I did say $10,000 that included credit cards. They sold their house in Newton, Massachusetts and moved their children to Yarmouthport, and they basically lived above a store. But it proved not only fortuitous, but it now became, in this instance, an icon. Employees seem to enjoy their jobs. I always remember cashiers always having a smile. I mean, did you find what you wanted? Well, mostly. There was everything here I wanted. But a group of employees here smile as they transform themselves into Christmas tree shop elves, with Christmas stocking hats and holding a variety of stuffed elves available in the Christmas decoration aisle. These elves had a variety of faces and were just the right size to hold or put on the mantle. But look at the legs above, wearing the same red and white striped stockings, but larger than life. Many of these employees would dress not only for the holiday seasons, but even for Halloween. But we saw in that instance that the Bill Ezekiels realized that the employees were the backbone of the company. I mentioned earlier the average ratio was 15 years of service. Of course, it was one of the few companies that offered not only maternity leave, vacation, a 401k, but health and dental, something that's unusual for a business on Cape Cod. Here, for their 5-year work anniversary, employees of the Christmas tree shop would receive a stick pin with an oval scrimshaw rendering of the company's logo, a red sleigh with a green Christmas tree. These attractive pins were handmade and hand engraved, being made from repurposed ivory keys sourced from discarded pianos. A lady would receive a stick pin, a gentleman would receive a tie tack. Martha Coates Pumfret, seen on the right, owned Scrimshaws by Marcy and proved to be a great success as it carried on the traditions of the 19th century sailor's tradition of etching scenes upon ivory, bone, or whale teeth. And Marcy became prolific in scrimshaw. For the 10th anniversary, it was actually a verdant link Tiffany silver bracelet. And for the 15th anniversary, a gold-filled watch with an alligator strap. They weren't extravagant gifts, but many of these employees were very proud to actually be recognized and receive them. People realized in that instance, maybe they didn't all have cookie-cutter jobs, but a lot of them still did more than what was expected of them. At the Pembroke store, employees posed for a group photograph after having collected a multitude of blue shopping carts from the parking lot. Obviously, it was a necessary chore, but they arranged the shopping carts in such a creative way with the large company logo seen in the background. If that was my daughter standing on one of those carts, I would have broken her legs. But the whole idea was that seen here, you too could be an authorized Christmas tree shopper. And this decal was designed by Doreen but was never used. It was not only fun, but it would have made shoppers feel important as an authorized Christmas tree shopper when they placed it on their automobile bumper. But many people came to the Christmas tree shops on a regular basis, often with family and friends, as a day out, exploring the aisles of the store, never knowing what one might find. And in that way, these two women have obviously just arrived. If you look at their cart, it's empty, so we know they've just arrived. They've arrived through the door and aromas of cinnamon greets them. Here, of course, it's during the fall season. We see fall wreaths and, of course, decorations that might be placed on a fence or even in your home. People began to realize there was always something that was new. But it was also the fact, after a morning of shopping for bargains at the Christmas tree shop, customers Judy Shanahan and Nancy Peters take a well-deserved break, enjoying a rest while sitting in the sun on a white plastic garden bench priced at $99.99. But as you can see, these bins would be filled with beach chairs, boogie boards, and of course, lawn furniture. Well, in that instance, this is the Albany store in Albany, New York. It was the last of the stores to be opened in 2003. Shoppers leave the Christmas tree shop in Albany, New York with bags of bargains during the holiday season. The woman on the right has a shopping bag that says, "'Tis the season to be jolly." Employee Kathy Cameron remembered that Chuck and Doreen put their trust in their employees. I worked with so many creative display artists and problem solvers. We did beautiful displays with just a few fixtures. And Chuck and Doreen brought us the most unique products and new trends. It was easy to highlight their finds. Beginning in 1975, the Bilezikians traveled to Hong Kong, and they set up a business plan with many factories, and they would send back all of the different things that they could sell in their store. But within a few years, they trained a group of buyers, both men and women, that went through the world. Brassware from India, from China, as well as even things such as Majolica and wonderful china from England. People began to realize it was unique. The unfortunate thing was the company would be sold in 2003 to Bed Bath & Beyond. They themselves had never intended to sell, but if they continued to expand, the Bilezikians realized they'd need another warehouse in Western Massachusetts. And even at 23 stores, the operation was becoming unwieldy. They decided to sell, in which they did at $200 million, but they only sold the name. They kept the property, and it went into a LLC that's known as Turtle Rock, which still survives on Willow Street in Yarmouthport. Well, Bed Bath & Beyond Incorporated announced on June 19th of 2003 the approximately $200 million all-cash acquisition of Christmas Tree Shops, a privately held retailer of giftware and household items, based in South Yarmouth, Massachusetts, Christmas Tree Shops, Inc. Bed Bath & Beyond continued to expand, and eventually we're in 37 states with over 90 individual stores. Of course, it was a little bit different. It didn't have a hands-on approach of the Bilezikians, but it was still successful. Bed Bath & Beyond would continue it, and it was continued until 2020 when they decided to sell it. Well, in this photograph, Christmas came early for Mark and Pam Salkovitz and their Handle Holdings company with the close of their deal to buy the Christmas Tree Shop business from Bed Bath & Beyond in 2020. It was reputedly $475 million. And again, it only included the name. Now the concept was, this was a profitable store, but we've seen many profitable stores not only fail, but some increase. Handle, which is a contradiction of their kids' names, Hannah and Dylan, bought the 80-unit Christmas tree operation as part of Bed & Bath's plan to shed non-core businesses and concentrate on its nameplate brand. But for Handle, which has operated mostly in the greeting card business for the past few years, the Christmas Tree Shops will be very much its prime focus. They were well known and they were successful, but they weren't successful with the Christmas Tree Shop. What do you remember what happened in 2020? COVID. Did anybody else not leave their house? We left the Back Bay and we came to Austerville and we stayed there because it was so much easier. We didn't have to deal with people. We could let the dog in the garden. But COVID not only killed people, but it killed the economy. During that period, you began to realize that they were affected. In November of 2020, Bed Bath & Beyond had sold the Christmas Tree Shop to Handle Holdings, and it was for an undisclosed amount. As I mentioned, it was $475. In November of 2021, the company quickly opened 19 pop-up holiday-themed stores across the United States, and these stores remained open through January of 2022. Well, if you were going to the Christmas Tree Shop, I think it was the cachet of the building and the uniqueness. If we had a pop-up here in the library, it wouldn't be quite the same thing. However, there seemed to be problems, as some stores were reported to be underproducing and were not as profitable as they had once been. Reuters reported the United States bankruptcy judge Thomas Horan had converted the company's Chapter 11 bankruptcy to a Chapter 7 liquidation. Horan ordered a court-appointed trustee to oversee the process to ensure that employees were paid for hours worked during the recent going out of business sale. And during the hearing, a lawyer for the Christmas Tree Shop said that store closing sales fell $14 million short of revenue projections. It's a horrendous amount of money. But when Handle Holdings bought the company, they absorbed the debt of Bed Bath & Beyond. They had a debt of $49 million. It's not unusual, but it was also, they could not refinance it. And it was at 29% compounded annually. During COVID, with a lack of customers and no mail order business, the company would actually go into bankruptcy. In that instance, we realized, probably you, as I did, watching television, that Wall Street Journal said the Christmas tree shops are preparing to file for bankruptcy protection. I was shocked. I thought to myself, I really thought this was a very good company. And it was on every news station. We realized in that instance it was something that was coming to an end of what was once an iconic store. And during August of that period, we saw women, more cashiers than had ever been at Christmas tree shops, with store closing sales beginning at 50% off. As a Chapter 7 liquidation, it wasn't just the merchandise on the shelves. It included the shelves, the lighting fixtures, the carpeting, chairs, anything that was available to reduce the debt. And in that way, people came by the droves. In the last chapter of my book, which I call A Lament for the Christmas Tree Shops, I say, on August 12th of 2023, the Christmas tree shops were closed after massive liquidation sales. The Christmas tree shops were well-known bargain stores selling food, toys, household furnishings, and Christmas decorations in stores that often resembled cottages, mansions, or lighthouses. And the closure of these once popular stores was incredulous. And as Gene Cooper of East Hampton poignantly said, quote, "Every time you come, there's always a lot of people here, and everybody comes for the sales. I'm sure it's going to be missed by a lot of people, me especially," unquote. It was the end of an era for the Christmas tree shops. But in this photograph, which shows all sorts of signs on the front door, it said, "Today is the final day. All sales final." But a handwritten note says, "To our loyal customers, don't cry because it's over. Smile because it happened." Very upbeat and positive aspect from somebody who was obviously losing their job. Well, in that instance, even here on the radio and television, they would always say something about the Christmas tree shop. But I love this. It's saying goodbye to the Christmas tree shop. It wasn't goodbye, but it was a great buy, because at the very last, it was 90% off anything that remained. I'm sure many people purchased holiday decorations, wrapping paper, bows, and things of that sort. But it was a poignant aspect and end to a wonderful place. Well, as one can see from this book, Chuck and Doreen Bilezikian were a strong team, and their marriage and work ethic were as strong as they were. Having taken a risk in 1970 to buy a failing business in Yarmouthport, to selling the company in 2003 to Bed Bath & Beyond, and they showed not only how hard work, drive, and determination could ensure the success of a small business, but also that success was to be earned and not merely given. Working long days, unpacking boxes, stocking shelves, and arranging merchandise in the evening was hard work, but they persevered. They grew the small seasonal business into a thriving year-round business that has become a destination on Cape Cod. In that way, we see the cover of the book, The Christmas Tree Shops. Don't you just love a bargain? Well, yes, we did love a bargain, and we love the Christmas tree shops. This is the type of book that I take great pride in writing. I've done books on many businesses that have now ceased to exist, that our children and grandchildren will never even know existed. The history of the Baker Chocolate Company, the history of Howard Johnson's, the history of Jordan Marsh, and of course today my galleys arrive from London on the history of S.S. Pearson Company. So we begin to realize that there's something that's not only one time a part of our lives and that of our parents and grandparents, but it's something that's a wonderful memory from the past. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed it.
Well, thank you. That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
And do you have time for any questions?
Of course. Please.
We spend a great deal of time in Dallas, and Christmas tree shops opened in Dallas. It's been a number of years ago, but it was under the Bed Bath & Beyond umbrella, and it was pretty obvious that they had not a clue what the Christmas tree shops were all about.
Well, he's saying about Dallas. Now, Dallas, of course, I wouldn't have expected a Christmas tree shop. But the concept was the Bill-Ezekians really learned on the job, but they learned well. They also had a coterie around them that actually saw the same as they did. And they created a business that was really successful. Bed Bath & Beyond jammed the aisles. They had things to the ceiling. It was basically, the more you got in, the more you sold. It was more of a business than a family business. And I think you're right. I mean, they didn't really know what they were doing. But they did double their money, and you began to realize after they unloaded it, they also unloaded their debt as well. Any business that's going out, of course, wants to get rid of their debt. But it's something in some ways, unfortunately, was at 29%.
Well, we felt like there had to be a distribution issue.
Right.
Because we were not familiar with too many other Bed Bath & Beyond stores between Dallas, Texas, and New England.
They did
I'm sure
have
that-
some, yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, but nevertheless, the distances were
Sure.
huge, and warehousing had to be an issue.
Well, that was the big reason the Bill-Ezekians, after they had gotten this unannounced offer of $200 million. Now, 2003, $200 million would be the equivalent today of about $1 billion, and if you really think about it. And what they did was to invest that money, not only in new property, but they give away tremendous amounts of money through their foundation. But it is true. I mean, they even said they would need a third warehouse if they continued to grow. They had one in Hyannis, they had one in Middleborough. They were talking about one towards the area of, I want to say Lee and Lenox in that area, because Albany was now the new store, so they needed something to be a little bit closer to that. So it is something that was really quite important. Yes.
So I used to live in Cotuit, and used to run by, I guess maybe it was Yarmouthport. One of the brothers had a home there, or the way I always understood it were that there were three brothers who started this
Oh,
Christmas
really?
tree shops. Maybe I got the wrong information, but there is a private home that one of them owned right there in Yarmouthport.
Read all about it.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
no, it was Doreen and Chuck Bill-Ezekian, and they had two sons that worked in the business.
Maybe that's what it was.
And
Okay.
they lived initially above the store at Willow and 6A, but they bought a huge estate on Mill Road. And not only did they have a house with the largest, you can imagine, thatch roof barn,
Beautiful.
but they had exotic animals. So it was more like a farm than anything else. The sons themselves, of course, were quite young in 2003, not children, but the concept was, one son, Gregory Bill-Ezekian, has taken it to new heights. He runs Fresh Picked in the original store
Right,
on 6A, and he also has Lighthouse Keepers, a coffee shop in Yarmouthport, which is also a major distributor of coffees and teas and things of that sort. The other son, Jeffrey, runs the foundation. So it's really quite a, how one might say, a giving back family.
So does one of them still live in that house?
No, he lives elsewhere, but they still own the house.
I see.
Yes.
Were the sons old, were there two sons in the
Correct.
business? Were they old enough to be useful when they opened in the beginning?
In 1970, they were 3 and 5, so I don't think they were much
How
help.
did they build a staff that quickly?
They didn't. According to what Mrs. Bill-Ezekian had told me, and believe me, I met with the woman weekly for months on end. I'm sure she hates me by now. She was somebody who said, we worked all day long doing this, and the children basically were in playpens, just like most of us were when our mothers or nannies were taking care of us. But she would say, once they were fed and put to bed, she and her husband went downstairs and stacked the shelves, unpacked boxes, swept up the floor, did the payroll, just like anyone else starting a business. But this business exploded, and it was accepted with such alacrity that people realized it was a great place to go. And I think in a lot of ways we probably all have something in our homes that came from a Christmas tree shop. Any other questions? Please, in the back.
I seem to remember that there was a restaurant at Sagamore Bridge, Lafayette Escadrille.
Nothing to do with the Christmas tree shop.
No, but the building was there as a restaurant,
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know that.
all right, before it
Does
went-
anybody else remember that? On the site of the Sagamore store. I never heard that. According to what I had read, it was a vacant lot, but, I had read it was a vacant lot, but maybe there was something there. But they had purchased it from the Howard Johnson Corporation, so maybe there was a small restaurant, but it was still owned the land by Howard Johnson Corporation. Do you have a question in that?
Yes, the Billazikians owned all of these wonderful properties. Did they sell them off one by one, or what?
They still own every single one of them. And, you know, the thing is, they go the gamut. The Sagamore store is going to be demolished. Sounds terrible. But the thing is, they've tried everything. Do you remember about a year and a half ago, it was a Halloween-themed adventure park? I mean, for 3 months, I didn't want to go, I didn't go. And now it's Tulip, where you can purchase $1,000 lawn chairs. And of course, it's better to have a building occupied and heated and air-conditioned rather than leaving it empty. They have tried to identify people that might use it as not only an Irish pub, but a function hall or a bar. Perfect parking. Nobody wanted to do it. They're going to keep the windmill, but they're going to demolish it for low-income housing. Now, it's not low-income as you might think. Because they themselves had catered to people in some ways on Cape Cod and employed people from Cape Cod, what they decided they would do was to build housing that would be for EMT workers, policemen, firemen, school teachers, and of course people that live on Cape Cod but cannot afford the average priced house of $1 million. I mean, it's not inexpensive to live on Cape Cod. And the concept here is maybe these people that not only provide a service on the Cape, but also southern Massachusetts, would have a place that would allow them to save to buy a house. They've also created things such as Ace Hardware in their Orleans store, and a lot of them have become Ocean State job lots. Now, I have to admit, I went to the one in Pembroke yesterday, and it is the nicest Ocean State job lot anyway. I bought plants, I bought candy, I bought all sorts of different things that I said I need. But when I left the store and I'm looking and I'm touching the side of the store, and I said, you know, when I write these books, I live them. And I sometimes think a year from now, I say, how did I write that? But I seem to go into a trance, and so I'm doing a book right now on Wednesday is Prince Spaghetti Day. Pellegrino, who started it, was at Harvard with my father, so I kind of grew up with the whole concept. So if you make a good story, and any of these things can be made into a fun story, you can apply it to advertising, marketing, and business acumen. But they didn't have a lot. And the Billazikians did this really on their own with advice. I'm sure they had wonderful financial consultants, a bank that probably supported them, and Bill Mullen, who was their right-hand man. But I can only imagine what it would be like if they didn't have that. So, any other questions or comments? Well, I do have a few books here. They're $20 a piece, cash or check. But it goes into greater detail, and there's about 150 photographs, some from Mrs. Billazikian, most I sourced, especially on eBay. But thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.